I've worked as a fire tower watchman for almost 8 years, and if there's one thing this job teaches you, it's that isolation doesn't arrive like silence. It arrives like memory decay, slow, quiet, convincing. At first, you think you're just alone. Then you start wondering if you've always been alone. My name is Aaron. At least, that's what I remember signing on the contract. I didn't come here for nature or peace. I came because everything else had already started slipping away. Jobs ended without warning. Conversations lost meaning halfway through them. People I cared about began feeling distant, like they were standing behind glass, moving, but never really reaching me. So when I was assigned to Tower 8, I didn't refuse. It sounded simple, predictable, something that wouldn't ask anything I couldn't give. I was wrong. My wife Claire left in the only way that hurts properly quietly. No argument, no final fight, no clear ending, just distance. At first she stopped visiting the tower. She used to come sometimes, sitting at the base with coffee going cold, while I stayed above her in the structure that always felt too high and too far away. Then the visits became rare. Then they stopped altogether. The calls changed after that. Shorter, careful, as if even her voice was learning not to disturb me. Eventually, even those stopped. Before she disappeared completely, she used to send drawings from our daughter Lily, crayon sketches folded into envelopes that smelled like home in a way I no longer deserved. A tall tower above endless trees, a small stick figure inside it, and always, 2 suns in the corner. "I drew you so you wouldn't be lonely," Lily wrote once. I taped them inside the cabin wall. Even when the edges curled, even when the colors faded, even when I started spending more time looking at them than at the forest itself. I told myself it was to remember what I was working for. But really, it was to remind myself I still existed outside the tower. Then came the fire. The Southern Valley burn. 3 years before this assignment. I saw it early, thin smoke threading through the trees like something testing whether it was ready to become real. I made the report. Then I hesitated, rechecked, delayed, convinced myself I still had time. 6 minutes. That's all it took for the wind to change and decide who would lose and who would survive. We contained it officially. The report was clean, controlled, successful, but I still smell it sometimes when I close my eyes too long. Like it never stopped burning somewhere I can't reach. That's the thing about fire, it doesn't stay where it happened. Neither do I. Tower 8 sits in northern Montana where maps stop pretending to be precise. No roads worth naming, no neighbors close enough to matter. Just steel, wood, and an endless forest that behaves like it's listening even when nothing is being said. The job is simple. Wake, scan, log, repeat, until time stops feeling like time. But on the 5th morning, something in the forest changed its posture. It stopped behaving like background. It started behaving like an observer. I woke before dawn. No alarm, no reason. That should have been normal out here. Your body learns the silence eventually. It starts waking up before the world does. But this was different. The silence wasn't empty. It was compressed. Like the air had been pressed into shape and told not to move unless it was permitted. I stepped onto the observation deck. Routine always goes the same way. East, north, west, south. But that morning, east broke first. On the eastern ridge stood another fire tower. Impossible, that ridge had been surveyed twice during my assignment. There was nothing there. No access route. No cleared land. No recorded construction. Not even a mention in older maps, not even a mistake you could argue with. And yet it stood anyway. Not like it had been built. Like it had been there so long that I was the one who had forgotten to notice it. My hand moved before I thought about it. Binoculars up. I expected distortion, distance error, heat shimmer, anything the brain could use to explain it away. But the image didn't blur. It sharpened. The wood grain matched mine. The paint fade matched mine. Even the way the light caught the window edges felt familiar in a way that made no sense. Not similar. Identical in history, not in presence. As if the forest hadn't constructed it. As if it had retrieved it from somewhere it was always stored. I lowered the binoculars for a second. Looked again. Still there. Still exact. Still wrong. And then, just as the first light of sunrise reached the ridge, it stopped existing. Not slowly. Not like something fading out of focus. Not like smoke dispersing. Just gone. One moment occupied space. The next, that space had never agreed to be occupied at all. The trees stood exactly where they always had. Unbothered. Unchanged. As if reality itself had corrected a clerical error and refused to acknowledge the draft version ever existed. Day 6. It returned. Same ridge, same impossible certainty. But something changed. There were more windows. My tower has 8. I counted them every morning out of habit. I never questioned. The other tower had 9. I counted twice. Then a third time. 9. At dusk, I checked mine again. Still 8. Day 7. My tower had 9 windows. I didn't hear anything change. I didn't see anything change. But when I walked the perimeter, counting them had become automatic, almost ritualistic, like repetition could anchor reality in place. 9. I stopped. Counted again. 9. It wasn't like something had been added. It felt worse than that. Like it had always been true, and my memory had quietly corrected itself without bothering to inform me, as if certainty could be rewritten in place while I was still standing inside it. That evening, the forest began to behave differently. Deer gathered at the base of the eastern ridge, too many to be coincidence. They didn't graze. They didn't shift. They didn't react to sound or movement or anything that should have pulled their attention away. They were all facing east, perfectly aligned, waiting without visible reason. None of them looked afraid. That was the most disturbing part. Just stillness with intent behind it. Like they were observing something I wasn't qualified to see yet. The second tower stood beyond them, just out of comfortable focus, and even when I forced myself to look directly at it, the animals didn't break formation. They remained fixed, like the entire valley had agreed on a direction and no longer needed discussion. Above them, the sky felt wrong in a way I couldn't immediately define. Birds circled overhead, but none of them crossed a certain invisible boundary stretching vertically above the ridge. It wasn't marked, it wasn't visible, but it behaved like a wall that didn't need substance to enforce itself. They turned back every time they approached it, every single one, until one didn't. It crossed by accident. A fraction too far. A fraction too late to correct its path. And then it stopped existing. Not falling, not disappearing in motion, just removal. As if the sky had edited out a mistake mid-sentence. No sound followed. No reaction rippled outward. The remaining birds continued circling as if nothing had changed, as if absence itself was not worth acknowledging. I didn't write it down immediately. I told myself I wouldn't. But later that night, when I opened the logbook, the entry was already there. Fresh ink. My handwriting. Atmospheric boundary confirmed. Do not question structure alignment. I stared at it for a long time. Because I didn't remember writing it. And because, worse than that, I recognized the hesitation in the letters. As if even my handwriting had started arguing with itself about what was allowed to be real. Day 8. The forest stopped behaving like environment. Smoke from a controlled burn rose upward normally, then paused, then reversed. It sank back into the ground like the sky had changed its mind. The radio turned on without power. "Aaron," a voice said. Not static, not distortion. Clear. I didn't respond. "Aaron," it repeated. Then my voice answered before I did. "You're adjusting slowly." I unplugged the radio. It kept speaking anyway. Day 9. 4:47 am. My watch stopped. At first I thought it had simply failed again, another mechanical error, another quiet inconvenience in a place where nothing is meant to be reliable for long. I reset it. 4:47. Still the same. I removed the battery, expecting at least a collapse into randomness, some surrender into broken time. 4:47. It didn't change. I threw it against the wall harder than I meant to. It hit the wood, bounced once, and when it landed again, the display was still locked at 4:47, as if impact itself had agreed not to matter. That was the moment I realized it wasn't malfunctioning. It was insisting. Outside, the forest had shifted. Not suddenly. Not violently. Just collectively. Like everything had received the same instruction at once. The trees no longer stood naturally. They leaned slightly east, trunks angled in subtle agreement, as if the entire forest had decided on a direction and no longer saw value in neutrality. Birds followed the same pattern, flight paths subtly adjusted, circling in patterns that always drifted toward the eastern ridge before turning back as if crossing something they couldn't acknowledge. Even the wind felt biased. It no longer moved through the valley randomly, it moved with intent, brushing past the tower and continuing eastward like it was being pulled. And the shadows, those were the worst. They didn't match the light anymore. They all stretched in the same direction, as if the sun itself had been repositioned without telling anything below it. Everything pointed toward the second tower. Not metaphorically. Physically, as if gravity had quietly chosen allegiance and nobody had been informed of the vote. That's when I noticed something I shouldn't have been able to ignore. The second tower wasn't reacting to me anymore. It wasn't copying. It was initiating. I lifted my hand without thinking, an unconscious movement, something small, just to test whether my perception was still intact. But before my fingers even fully rose, I saw it happen in the other tower. The figure inside had already moved, already touched its face, already completed the gesture I hadn't finished deciding to make. Not reflection, not delay. Precedence, as if my actions were no longer the original event, but the echo of something that had already been decided somewhere else first. My breathing slowed. I forced myself to stop moving entirely. No adjustment, no reaction, no thought that could leak into motion. The figure in the second tower did not stop. It continued the sequence I had begun thinking about, but never executed, completing it cleanly, precisely, like a system finishing a task I had only cued. Then it stopped. And waited. As if my stillness was the interruption. Day 10. My logbook was filled before I opened it. Entire pages. Observations, decisions, even emotional notes. All dated in the future. One line repeated, "You will not remain Aaron past sunrise." I closed the book, opened it again. The same entry was now earlier, as if the timeline had adjusted itself to be more confident. That morning, the radio operator called me by a different name. "Daniel," he said. "Report status." I froze. "That's not my name." A pause. Then I know. Day 11. The forest stopped pretending to be neutral. Every deer was gone except one, standing at the base of the ridge, facing east. Unblinking, waiting. When I stepped outside, it turned its head toward me. Not afraid, not curious, expectant, like it recognized something I hadn't yet admitted. The second tower was closer now. Or I was further. The difference stopped meaning anything. That night I saw movement inside it, not reflection. Initiation. A version of me stood in the observation room. Still, patient, waiting. Then, it scratched its cheek. I felt my own hand twitch before I decided to move. And I realized something I didn't want to understand. It was no longer copying me. It was teaching me what I would do next. Day 12. I packed my bag. Not because I chose to. Because the logbook already described it in completed tense. I left the tower before sunrise. The forest didn't react, it simply observed. Every tree leaning slightly inward as I walked through it. Like I was moving through something that had already decided I belonged elsewhere. At the base of the trail, I turned back. My tower stood behind me. Perfect, stable, correct, except every window was lit, and in each one, a silhouette stood facing outward, watching me leave like it was confirming a result. Not mourning, not waiting, just verifying. I don't remember the walk to the road clearly. Distance behaved strangely. Sometimes it felt immediate, sometimes it felt endless, as if space couldn't decide how much of me it was allowed to keep. A pickup crew was waiting when I arrived. No questions, no urgency, routine extraction. No one mentioned the second tower, no one mentioned anything at all. Months later, I tried to locate Tower 8 on official maps. Sometimes it existed, sometimes it didn't. Sometimes there were two, one labeled correctly, one unlabeled entirely, and every morning 4:47 am. I wake before I remember why. And for a few seconds, before my eyes fully adjust, I see it again in the window reflection. A second tower, and inside it someone standing exactly where I used to be, watching the forest the way I once did, waiting for the moment I finally stop being the one who left. And then, one morning, I woke up earlier than 4:47. The room was already lit, the door was already open, and someone was standing inside it, looking at me like they had been waiting longer than I had ever existed. They smiled slightly and said, "You're back early, Daniel." I tried to speak. My throat didn't recognize the shape of the answer anymore. "My name is Aaron," I said. The person frowned. "Who's Aaron?"